Jeff and I wanted to talk about DSOs, dental service organizations, and the like, and this wave that's happening in dentistry. It's not unlike what happened in medicine, right, Jeff? Isn't
Oh,
that? I mean, that was
Gerry.
10 years
Yeah,
ago.
it's a tidal. It's not a wave. It's a tidal wave. I mean, there are just 2 years ago. I was at groups or meetings, and they 2 years ago they were saying in 5 years, 20% of the dental practices are going to be consolidated into group practices. Today they're saying 5 years from now, 80% of
80.
dental practices will be incorporated into some group or DSO in one form or another. So it's not just a
Yeah.
wave. I mean, it's a tidal wave. And to be honest, I mean, we're going to talk about some of the reasons why it's a good idea to consider joining a group. But the earlier you're in on that tidal wave, potentially the better outcome it could be for you. So
Yeah. All right. Well, Jeff, let's have a talk about
yes,
this, and
looking forward to
I
it.
think that I think all of you will find this quite
Yeah.
interesting and very useful information. So, Jeff, you just said that they come by other names too. What are these other catchy terms?
Yeah. So, I mean, dental service organization, dental support organization. So some of them still use the DSO, but then I've heard recently the DPO, the Dental Partnership Organization. It's all the same thing. I mean, words are important, and I think they're trying to emphasize what they're about or differentiate themselves a little bit. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, everyone knows these organizations as DSOs, however you want to define
How
them.
long ago did you finish dental school and then your pediatric dental residency? How long ago was that?
I finished dental school in 2000, and then my pedo residency in Houston finished that in 2002.
Did you start off with? I know you have multiple offices, but you just started off with one office. Is that what you did?
That's right. Yeah, I was looking for a practice that I could purchase, even though I had no money and was probably not a great lending, candidate. But yeah, I found an office where a guy wanted to retire, and he was willing to finance most of it, so it was a good fit.
You then decided to open more locations.
Yeah, when we were a couple of years into it, it was already because it was already an existing office. It was already pretty busy, and we were at that point where traditionally a lot of doctors would limit the type of patients they were willing to accept in terms of insurance or not insurance or whatever. Have those kind of conversations, and to me personally, it didn't make a lot of sense to stop seeing certain kinds of patients that I was willing to see right already, and so I was looking for ways to accommodate more patients and and then right around that time there was another practice that came up for sale, and anyway the circumstances around that one sort of fit with what I was doing, and so I added that second location.
Did you, at that point, did you have a formal business training background, Jeff?
No, no,
No.
no, no one in dentistry does. I mean, it's not, and I get it. It's a sore point for everybody who appreciates the business side of a dental practice. Everyone knows that there's just not room in the curriculum of dental school to give us any kind of foundational sort of business knowledge education, and so we're all doing it, by gut feel and whatever. I mean, there are a couple of programs out there I think that try to tie in an MBA, but
Yeah, and some of these programs, I don't have but a small amount of firsthand knowledge about how effective that really is for someone who gets a degree, for example, in orthodontics and an MBA. I'm just not sure about that. But you bring up an interesting point. The point being that personally, I finished dental school in 1975, pediatric dentistry in 1979, and then orthodontics in 1980. 81. That was at Northwestern, and I had no business background at all, nothing in
Right.
any way, shape, or form. But I didn't need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now things have changed a lot, and one of the things that I've heard from, I'll respect this individual's privacy, but I'll just say that this person is not a dentist. He is a captain of industry. That is global industry. That is not a lightweight statement. And I had a conversation with this person, and I said, "Well, what do you think the formula for success is in any business?" And he said, "There's really only two things in any business: consistent customer service. Magic word is consistent customer service.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is you have to know how to run a business." From your standpoint, how many offices did you have eventually, or do you still have now that you've partnered with specialty dental brands?
We were up to 21 locations. I say 21 locations. I mean, one of those was a surgical center. Three of those were full-time pedo ortho and general dentistry operating in one large sort of mega location stations.
And how many employees do you have?
We were 250, yeah, 250 employees.
For real?
Yeah, I mean, that includes doctors. But yeah, I mean, easy. Yeah, 250.
Whoa! I mean, well, Jeff is already aware of this, but for those of you watching this podcast, my practice was one location, one assistant, and one front desk person, and I did not accept insurance. So you're looking at the yin and the yang here. I mean, this is like the before and the after. I mean, I hear those numbers and think, I mean, I may need to get on Prozac or something. I mean, this is just incredible to me that when people have this talent. Now, what I'm interested in, and I think people watching the podcast are interested in as well, this substantial organization going for how many years before you decided to look into partnering with a DSO? How many
Yeah, I
years?
mean, well, it wasn't substantial until, closer to the end because over those 20 years, we grew. There was no strategy to grow, super aggressively. I hear about certain groups that are able to go from, 0 to 20 offices in 18 months. We went to 20, 21 locations somewhat in like 20 years. So we were, there were some years we didn't add any locations, and then some years we would add a couple, but that was pretty much, it was kind of this steady growth. So we weren't this substantial organization for a long period of time. It was slow growth. There was a point in there when we were at 6 or 7 locations, I did feel like I was outstripping my own sort of knowledge base. And so I went and at a local university here, took a couple of years and did an MBA, just because I felt like there were conversations where I was, over my head. When I was talking to bankers or other, lending partners, I was sort of out of my league. And but for one, it bothered me. But number two, like if I was going to keep growing, I needed to get some of that foundational stuff. So I'm glad I did it. But yeah, there was a point where I felt like I had to do that.
So my take on that would be that you had a natural business sense. I mean, I think that there's a book called The One Thing You Need to Know About Great Management, Great Leadership, and Sustained Individual Success. And what is remarkable about, which is a research-based thing, by the way, by Marcus Buckingham, you have to have natural talent. And if you follow your own natural talent, that's why I say I think that you had a natural talent for business sense, which I personally do not have. Now, and I'm not saying that pejoratively. I mean that. I really don't. I never had to.
But I think you'd be surprised. I mean, when you talk about like a business sense, I mean, you cared about probably with your 2 employees and yourself and your patients. I mean, I think you probably cared about what your patient experience was. You were you wanted to, I mean, you were your own treatment coordinator, like you said before, because you knew what you wanted to communicate. So in my opinion, I mean, a lot of business sense is just about solving problems to make your product easier to accept for your patients or your customers, and doing it systematically. So if you do those things, that if you're doing those things naturally, you say you don't have any business sense, but if you're doing those things, that's that's all it is. All I did was add one other thing, and that was, how can I multiply this now? Now that I've got it down in one location, how can I do this in, multiple locations? And that's just one other skill set, but it's built on top of providing good service to your patients. And you want your customers, your patients, to like you, and so the way that you do that is you provide really quality, service, and then a great experience. And if you do that, a lot of dentists say that they don't have the business savvy. They're only looking at other guys who have, group practices or built, more locations. That's just one aspect of, having a little bit of, business sense and business savvy.
Yeah, well, I think that's well said. I decided who I was not. Who I was, as you said, it's a customer or patient and parent experience, and solving. People call them challenges. See, I like that. These challenges. Right. To me, they're problems. Period.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And to problem solve quickly and satisfy the consumer, the customer, the patient, the parent. That needs to be done very, very quickly. That's part of the customer experience. You establish this substantial organization over a 20-year period. How did you? What was going through your mind as you started chewing on the idea of selling or partnering with somebody? How did that go, Jeff?
Yeah. So part of it was, what is my exit strategy going to be? Because now, we had grown to a size where there weren't that many potential people who could, purchase or acquire what we, had established. And so part of it was thinking forward in terms of like, how do I unravel myself from this thing now? That was one thought. Another was, just in the last 10 years, the market for consolidating dental offices has just gone through the roof. And so, coupled with my a little bit anxiety about how I eventually someday get out of this with what's happening currently in the market, made it so it was interesting at least to hear, what was going on, what groups had to offer. Anybody who's thought through this and has, a practice or two has probably already been approached by a group or several groups out there over the last years. We've several groups a year would come to us and talk about partnering. And, everybody's timing is different. And for us, the timing has just been sort of right more recently to where we were looking at those conversations more seriously. But that's something that everybody needs to think about too, because before we partnered with specialty dental brands, when we were just our own thing, we acquired a couple of offices where the seller, was a guy who'd been working at his practice for 30 plus years, sometimes close to 40 years. And they thought that they were going to retire on the value of their practice. There are these guys who get to that point, and then they struggle, or they maybe just keep putting it off. And in the meantime, their body is taking the toll of 30, 40 years of dentistry, and they're slowing down, and if you cut a day here and then a couple years later cut another day out of your schedule, you stop taking new patients. I mean, the value of your practice just sort of does this nosedive. And so there is something to be said for timing your exit such that what you've built, you get to benefit from the value of that before, you have this natural decline at the end.
Yeah, I think that a misconception that I've run into numerous times with people, Jeff, is that they think they can sell potential. They'll say, well, 3 or 4 years ago, before I started taking 2 days a week off, I was making this
Right.
grand amount of money, and so their practice has had a curve that you were talking about doing this, then it
Yeah.
plateaued, and then it slipped. Now, any business, not just dentistry, and you don't acquire businesses that are on the losing side of the coin. You don't want a business that's slipping. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, I mean, we've acquired those in the past. It's just that it takes more effort to turn that curve around and get it going the other way. Whereas if you have something that's been on a steady and we acquire it, then immediately we can make it just a little bit better. But one that's on the decline, it takes more time to get that moving in the right direction. So yeah, from an acquisition standpoint, if I'm the person who's partnering but also acquire, if I'm the buyer, it's harder to get me excited about a practice that has decreased by 10% over the last 5 years. I mean, by 10% a year for the last 5 years, than it is for something that can show at least steadiness, if not a little bit of growth. Yeah, there are some who their model is to take a practice that maybe could use some work, but those are, I mean, the majority of them out there are looking for, healthy practices that are successful, doing it well.
Yeah, there was one outfit I've consulted with in the past that the CEO said, "Well, I buy businesses with warts. That's what
Right.
I do." He said, "That's what I'm good at. I buy businesses on the courthouse steps. I fix them,
Hmm.
and then I flip them. I sell them."
Yeah.
But in specialty dental brands, that's not the
No.
ballpark we're in. We're in the other side of it.
Right. Yep. Because it takes a lot of, I mean, he made it sound easy. I take something with warts, I fix it, and then I flip it. Like that, fix it, that phrase, fixing it for a dental practice, that takes a lot of time and effort. And there are a lot of work, specific, very, specialized work that has to be done to do that. And so, a lot of these groups would rather devote their time and energy and resources elsewhere instead of, now, to be honest, if you put in that work, you do get a really great return because you're buying something that, had all the warts and stuff on it, and then you get to sell it as a, beauty queen or something. But, that's not a lot of groups out there. That's not what they're interested in. And there are reasons for that too. That goes into their funding sources. Like they don't have time horizons of, 10 years. They have, 3 to 5 year time horizons for most of these groups. And so they can't, set aside the resources and time and energy to take something that needs work and fix it and then get the benefit of that fix before they sell it. So
Yeah, that's interesting what you brought up. When you were making, because obviously you had conversations with a number of DSOs. Is that a
yes,
fair statement?
yes,
And you just mentioned, Jeff, the 5 year time window that where
right,
most companies are looking to flip the business, not just dental companies, but most companies are looking to flip the business up the food chain or the food chain. There's something called the bigger fool theory, that a bigger fool than me will buy this.
yeah,
That is not what we're doing in specialty dental brands. How much
right.
would you explain how much that had to do with your decisions in making the final group that you wanted to consider, and what it is we are doing in specialty as far as the long-term plan.
Right. So I mean, the short answer to your question is it was probably the main reason why we went with specialty dental brands. Now, the history of that, I mean, for those who are interested in what's happening in the market but aren't really sure what's going on, I mean, a little bit of history there is helpful. So, private investors like you or me, or maybe you've already participated in a fund for real estate or something. Private investors will put money into a fund, and then they require the fund managers to find good places for their money to invest it for a while. And that's what private equity is. And private equity money is what's backing most of these large dental DSOs that are out there today.
The vast majority, right?
Yeah, the vast majority. And it may not be just private individual investor money. Some of it's institutional money. Some of it's retirement accounts of, Canadian teachers or something. I mean, these are all sources. Everyone wants a good return for their money. And so it's the work of private equity to find good investments for that money. Now, people and institutions that invest their money in private equity, they expect to get their money back with a return in 3 to 5 years. And so that's why you keep seeing these organizations flipping every 3 to 5 years, because they have to get that money back to the original investors.
Now, what about if in that 3 to 5 year period that the business is very lackluster or losing money? Do they sell anyway?
Oh yeah.
Just get out, take their losses, and get out?
Yeah, because usually these funds, it's a fund, and so the DSO that's part of this fund is just a part of it. They may also have investments in dermatology clinics or in veterinary clinics if it's a healthcare specific fund. There are also funds that may have a little bit of everything. They might have some commercial real estate. They might have some McDonald's franchises and some dental practices. I mean, that could all be in one fund. And if there are underperformers within that fund, yeah, they can sell off those parts out of the fund, at any time along the way. That kind of goes to your up the food chain, I guess, or if it's underperforming or something. But yeah, that's what's going on for a vast majority of these DSOs. They're backed. The money behind their growth and their consolidation is from private equity. Now, there are other sources of funding, and in the investment world, what's called a family office is really just one person or one family's money. It's not capital that's raised from a lot of investors. It's one person or one family that has very high net worth and is looking for their own sources of investment. They fund their own, basically, private equity fund. And that is what is interesting about specialty dental brands. So specialty dental brands is backed by Leon Capital Group, which is really the funding of one individual, and who in the past has made most of his investments in real estate, but is branching out into healthcare. And so, he's got this part of his investment portfolio is specialty dental brands.
And the the idea of diversifying, what little I do know about investing, just look at the most exceptional companies. They diversify heavily, and then they make sure that they hire people and partner with people that have that same vision and area of ethics as well as expertise. So
Right.
where we're different with specialty dental is because of and there is no 5 year we got to dump it plan. Isn't that right?
Correct. Yeah, because it's one investor's or one family's money. If he's happy with the investment and what it's producing in its growth, there's no restriction that it has to be sold in 3 to 5 years. It could